Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Babe Talk. My name is Gina DeFord. I'm the founder of Babe Crafted, and I'm very excited to bring you our Babe Talk with Brittany Renew. So today's theme is priorities over perfect, priorities over perfection, the secret to getting more done with less. So Brittany is a realtor, an author, and a podcast host. She believes in immersing herself in the culture where she lives and works to help others thrive in the Sunshine City. She believes it's not simply about buying or selling a home, but about building your community. In October of 2023, she published her first book in the young adult fantasy series, Lion of Fire, and she's currently working on the second book. So Brittany wears a lot of hats. She's a real estate agent, a podcaster, and an author. We're going to be diving into not just her story, but the lessons that she has to share with us. A little bit about what you can expect from today's Babe Talk. We do have some pre-submitted questions, but we are also going to have some Q&A. Please don't be shy about sharing any questions or thoughts in the chat, and I will hold on to them until it is time for Q&A. I'll also have a couple of exercises to put in the chat just to kind of keep everybody, energized and in tune with what we're chatting about, and just kind of hear what everyone is thinking as we're going through today's talk. We've got one awesome hour together. We're going to use up every bit of it. So without further ado, our first exercise is for you to just pop in the chat real quick and tell us who you are and what you do. That would be a great way to kick things off. And then we're going to pass the microphone over to Brittany. So Brittany, tell us who you are. Tell us a little bit about your business and yeah, just why this topic resonated for you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Gina. And that was a great intro. I appreciate that. And I'm so excited to be with everybody today. I mean, you know how much I love this community, so I'm just like happy to provide any bit of value that I possibly can. Yeah, so I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama, and literally within like a week, we are coming up on our 10-year anniversary of living in St. Pete. Absolutely just love St. Pete, fell in love with it. And I feel like it also just helped me really kind of kick it to the next level in my like entrepreneur journey by moving here. It really helped me just kind of like get clear on who I wanted to be as a person, as an entrepreneur. And since then, it's been a wild ride. I've grown my real estate business, which is going to be, gosh, I've been in the industry for almost 13 years, which is kind of crazy. And like as you said, I achieved my longtime dream of publishing a fantasy novel, and that is a series idea that I came up with in 2009 and started working on. So that has been a very long time coming. And yeah, also host a podcast. I had a podcast called St. Pete Soul, where I was focusing on the local business community in St. Pete. I've since kind of like put that a little bit on the back burner as I started a new podcast. Just talking, it's called Be Your Own Hero, and it's just kind of embracing a little bit more from the writer side of things about truth and fiction and how we can be brave and become the heroes of our own stories. And so, yeah, those are all the things that I'm passionate about.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I love how you said that, you're putting your podcast on the back burner, but not really because you started a new podcast. So we're
One
just,
podcast to another.
yes, absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about the lesson that you learned in 2024? This lesson that taught you about where to focus your energy and how to prioritize the things that are important to you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it was interesting to see how uh, once I kind of got really clear on what was important to me, it helped me actually create that framework and those boundaries and like step by step. I've shared this many times. I've been working with a business coach since 2019, and specifically, he's helped me in that regard of like thinking through what priorities and goals that I have and coming up with actual strategy around it. And I think also like that's kind of what I realized was if I can sit down and figure out what's important to me, I can then create strategy around it. And by doing that for like a whole calendar year, you can see like such a huge progress by the time you get to the end of that year. So by looking back on 2024, that's what I realized was I got clear on I wanted to finish the first draft of book two. I wanted to keep my real estate business growing, sustainably. And then I just broke it down and looked at it like week by week. What does that look like? How many hours can I commit to writing? How many, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think that was, I proved basically, it's like I proved to myself that I could do those things. I could write a book and keep my real estate business going, keep serving my clients well. And I don't know, I think we make things like way bigger in our minds than they actually are. But when you sit down and really think about it and you start breaking things down, you can see how, oh, this is actually manageable. Step by step, I can do this and it is manageable. So I think that's kind of like the biggest thing that I learned from last year. And it's helped like carry that into this year for sure.
That sounds like a very powerful lesson. I would love to get into the nitty-gritty of how you wrote over 100,000 words last year while running your real estate company. And not just running your real estate company, but also having it be the best income year for you so far in your journey.
Yeah, I think that often we feel like we have to do a million things to try to achieve our goals, and that's really not true. There's really only like, I've heard this phrase called the vital few. What are the vital few things that are going to move that goal forward? And and I'm sure you've heard of the 80/20 rule, and that's kind of the same concept of like 20% of your activities is going to drive 80% of your growth. And you could flip that to 20% of your clients are driving like 80% of your referrals. It's that kind of idea. And so I think we get bogged down into thinking we have to do a million different things when it's really, there are probably a handful of things that you should be doing, and you're going to get a much bigger result by focusing on that. And, I think so for me, it was like, okay, with real estate, it was like, okay, yeah, what's the 20% of my like client base or agent partners that if I just focus on like, you know, loving on them and providing value, I'm going to continue to get those referrals and keep my business growing in a sustainable way. Or from a marketing perspective, what's like the most impactful marketing thing I could do, instead of feeling like I got to do a million different marketing strategies. With writing, I think it was more just coming down to like, when am I most productive, like on a daily, weekly basis, and just like carving out that time. So, for me, it was often like, let me push myself to get up a little earlier and use that like quieter time during the morning to put my phone on do not disturb, which is another another thing, making sure you're not getting like pinged and, chasing this shiny object. So putting my phone on do not disturb and just like writing for an hour. And it's like, okay, is the world going to fall apart if you don't respond to someone in an hour? No, it's not. And I still struggle with that. It's definitely not a perfect thing, but I think that's definitely a big lesson to learn, is like knowing that you can like, put your phone on do not disturb, like kind of block out the world type thing and just like focus on whatever that task is for 30 minutes, for an hour, and everything's going to be okay. The world's not going to fall apart, and you're going to be able to get so much more done because you're in like a flow state at that point. Um, yeah, so that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of how like I look to structure my business planning, and I've carried that into this year for sure.
Right on. Okay, so let's talk about owning these priorities that we're committing to. It's one thing to say that this is something that's important to us, but there's another thing about really making sure that we're carrying that forward. So can you talk a little bit about that concept?
Yeah, I think when you say owning, that just makes me think of the word identity. So I think, you need to like really see yourself as whatever that is. Like, so for me, I had to own the identity as a real estate agent, as an author, as a podcaster. And I think when you do own that, when you own those things, it helps you have a lot more confidence around creating like goals and strategies. So I think like it's that imposter syndrome, right? So like if I didn't own the identity of being a writer, then feel I wouldn't like feel like I could carve out time. Maybe it's like, probably on average, last year I was spending like 5 to 10 hours a week with like writing and some of those kind of author activities. And so if I didn't own that identity as a writer, I would feel total guilt for carving out that time on a weekly basis. And, again, we're all human. Like I still struggle with some of those feelings of guilt, with imposter syndrome and all that. But I think that's like a really big step is owning that identity piece around like who you are as an entrepreneur, as a person, like what lights you up, because it's like, you got to take care of yourself. You got to fill your soul up, or you're not going to be able to pursue these dreams. You're not going to be able to like show up as the best version of yourself in all these different areas of your life. Yeah, so I think owning that is really important. And I think the other side of that is making sure like you're slowing down enough to spend time with yourself to figure out what those answers are. It's so easy just to like keep going, speeding through life because our days and our weeks are so busy. And, there's always something popping off that you gotta feel like you have to pay attention to. And my coach like still gets on to me about this. It's like you just gotta slow down and spend some time with yourself, reviewing like where you're at with some of those goals. Like, how can you know if you're on track or off track if you're not like stopping to like review that stuff, and having metrics you can like check on. And again, if you're not slowing down, how can you really know what's important to you? If you're not spending time reflecting on that stuff, how can you know those priorities that are the most important? How can you know like what those things are about yourself that are non-negotiables? So I think that's another element to it is just like making sure. And I would encourage everyone to have like a block of time on a weekly basis where all you're doing is like spending time reflecting, you know, reflecting from a standpoint of like, what are your wins this week and some of that type of stuff, but also like actually diving back into your business plan and seeing like, am I on track or off track with these goals? And then that way, as you do that, you'll see ways you might need to pivot and, kind of keep yourself from going too far down a road where you're getting too off track and you can kind of adjust things as you go along. So yeah, that's my advice.
Very, very helpful. And so speaking of, really getting into the nitty-gritty of what our priorities are, can we talk about going deep instead of wide, and focusing only on a few things to achieve our goals? So we just want to get even more specific about some of the concepts that we're chatting about.
Yeah. So I think like that idea is, feeling, and I mentioned this earlier, it's like feeling like you have to do a million different things to achieve whatever that result is. And so that's going wide. But if it goes back to the 80/20 rule, the vital few, if you go deep, you're going to get a much greater impact. And again, spending time with yourself to be able to figure out what those priorities are, so that you can create a strategy around going deep instead of going wide. And so like when I'm making a business plan for a year, I'm thinking about like just a few initiatives that I would want to like achieve by the end of the year. And I think it's hard to, I think it is hard to do that. And I think the reason why is because like I think we fall into that scarcity mindset that if we don't do a million things, we're not actually gonna get where we want to go. But when you spread yourself too thin, you know, you're definitely not going to get there. Oh, there's a quote by Rory Vaden, diluted focus gets diluted results. So that's like that hits the nail on the head right there. Diluted focus gives you diluted results. So you're going to be able to achieve so much more by having really focused time on those few priorities. And I think the other aspect to that is if you do, monthly or quarterly like business planning where you are sitting down and reviewing everything like we just talked about, you can then see how you need to pivot. So like maybe you've made a lot of progress on this one goal and you feel like it's a good time to kind of shift your focus into something else for the next 3 months. And I think that's a good way to look at it. But yeah, I think it goes back to people aren't always willing to do that because it is that scarcity mindset. And I'm so guilty of this. Like this was me 100%. I'm just like running a million miles an hour thinking that that's what's going to make a difference. And at the end of the day, it's being super focused on a few things, it's going to make such a big impact. Um, and I think the other thing that makes it hard for people is the society that we live in. It's definitely like instant gratification. That's the way our society operates is instant gratification. So it takes a lot of patience to drill down and only focus on a few priorities and kind of focus on those for a quarter at a time or maybe a whole calendar year. We always want to get somewhere faster, like always. I'm so guilty of this. And but it's just like that's just not the way life works. Like that's not the way true success works. It takes longer. It just takes longer to get there than you think it does, like always. I mean, I'm sure you can all think of like examples of that in your own life where you were working towards a goal and it's like everything always takes longer than you think it's going to. But it's like trusting that process that it's going to be awesome. It's going to be the way it needs to be when you actually do get there. So yeah, that's my advice is just like holding on to that patience because that's really going to serve you because you just got to keep going. It's going to take longer than you think, but it's going to be 100% worth it in the end.
I love that reminder. You know, it can feel discouraging when we feel like we should be in a certain place, but we're not there yet. But it is all part of the process. You know, worthwhile things take time and sometimes a little bit more, a lot bit more time than we think. So I put the next exercise in the chat. I would love to know from everyone what is something in your life that you want to make more of a priority, but it has continued to be on the back burner. Um, Please feel free to get as specific as you would like. This is a really comfortable space and no judgment zone, and it would be wonderful to be able to cheer each other on. So that being said, the next question for Brittany is, why do you think it's a challenge for people to drill down on their priorities, you know, and focus on the few instead of the many?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely like what we were just talking about. And I think like if we drill down into the scarcity mindset a little bit more, so I think that is a really big driver. Um, what you focus on expands. So if you're focusing on that scarcity, that fear, that worry, that's what's going to grow in your life. And I think a way to combat that is, well, number one, a big way to combat that is to like start your day off right with, having like a gratitude mindset, because that's going to help you stay like keep focusing, refocusing your mind on positive things in your life and all the awesome things that you have in your life, to be grateful for those things. And I think affirmations are like another good way to just kind of reinforce some of those positive things. Um, yeah, and I think that spending time to try to reprogram your brain to focus on abundance instead of scarcity. I mean, we're really powerful creators. Like our brains are very powerful creators. So like we just said, what you focus on expands. That is literally how our brains are wired to work, is our brains are actively trying to validate out in the world whatever our like perceptions are. And it's that story about like if you start shopping for a car, I have a Subaru. So if I'm shopping for a new Subaru, and of course I own a Subaru, so it's the same concept. I see Subarus all over the place. Well, people didn't just magically get more Subarus. It's just because my brain is like wired to look for Subarus now. So that's the same principle that applies here by spending some time to reframe that mindset of looking for abundance in the world, looking for opportunities out there to further your goals. That's going to help you so much more make progress versus living in that scarcity mindset, thinking that it's never enough. Everything I'm doing is not enough. I'm not enough. I mean, ooh, I struggle with that. Again, it's like no one's perfect. I still struggle with those feelings of like I'm not doing enough. And I think that you really just have to like make sure that you're talking to yourself in a kind way and like giving yourself grace because we're not robots, we're gonna make mistakes, but like talking to yourself kindly and, you know, reinforcing the positive things instead of the negative things in your life.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I want to call some attention to some of the answers we received. So, looks like some of these answers were focused on health. And, we can often put ourselves on the back burner, our own wellness on the back burner, let alone launching a new business or starting a new project or a home renovation or, planning that trip that's been on our mind. I mean, even all those things aside, like something that should be so foundational of our health. It's interesting that that is something that is, we're seeing as a trend here.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's talk about what you think should be the main takeaway, Brittany, for mastering the art of focusing on our priorities over perfection.
Main takeaway, I would say like a couple things. You can't know what those priorities are if you don't sit down and think through what they are. Like I've been talking about, carving out dedicated time to think through what those priorities are and then writing. Like I have like a whiteboard. I'm really big about like kind of writing stuff down, like getting it in front of me so that I, can stay on my mind. So like spending time to figure out what those things are, put it up on your whiteboard, somewhere like that where you can like keep it top of mind. And let's see. Yeah, I think that's like the other aspect would be thinking through your schedule and protecting your time. So like how do you need to structure your day to day and your weeks? How do you need to block out time in your calendar to make sure that you're working on those things? You're working, you know, working on your business instead of always being in the business. Like for me as a real estate agent, okay, well, I'm out on listing appointments, I'm out showing buyers. That's all awesome. But if I'm doing that all the time, then I'm never sitting down thinking about what my marketing strategies are and, tracking and measuring if I am meeting my goals. So it's like you've got to protect that time to work on that stuff for your business, for yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to be running yourself ragged and you're going to look up 3 months from now and go, whoa, how did I get here? I'm like, feel very far off track. And it's because you were going 90 miles an hour and, you didn't catch that pivot, that you before it kind of all got like a runaway train at that point. Um, but of course, it's never too late to stop and pivot. That's something that I've like had to give myself grace for. It's never too late to stop and adapt and change, make a different decision. You're never too far gone with that stuff. So give yourself grace on that for sure. But yeah, I would say, you know, having like a weekly kind of business meeting with yourself so you can review that stuff so that you can know whether you're on or off track, kind of setting those metrics and then looking at your calendar. Where is my time going? How can I like be more like how can I optimize my time by carving out those like blocks? Maybe it's an hour, every morning where you're just like working on this one priority. Stuff like that. So that would be my kind of overall like key takeaways advice.
That's wonderful. Thank you so, so much. So, as we're giving the ladies a chance to respond to our last exercise, which is to share what your biggest takeaway has been so far today, I'm going to choose someone at random to win a gift card to your favorite coffee or tea shop. This is a digital gift card. So, the winner, once I choose someone through a random number generator, you're going to send me your where you'd like me to email the gift card to. So I have your email address, but I mean like what coffee or tea shop. So that being said, Brittany, I've got one more question for you while I pick a winner. And that question is, do you have any resources that you would share that have been helping you with the process of, time blocking, planning out these projects? And this can be resources like tools, or it can be resources like, books or podcasts or anything like that that you've especially enjoyed.
Yeah, I think like one of the best books that talks about like kind of defining your habits and like protecting your time and blocking out stuff on your calendar like that, I would say would be James Clear's book Atomic Habits. And I'm sure a lot of people, I mean, it's such a wildly popular book. I'm sure so many people have already read it. I think it'd be a good reread. Like it's been years since I've read it. It'd probably be a good idea to reread it now, like having like a, you have a different perspective, you're going to take different things out of a book like that for sure. I would say Jeff Olson's Slight Edge. So kind of those two books in tandem, or it's a lot of those same principles. With Slight Edge, it's talking about like kind of making incremental progress, where like that's really important because it starts to build steam, pick up momentum when you're making that incremental progress. Um, I would say that finding some kind of tool that can help remind you of like tasks and stuff, I think is really important. It's just you can't keep it all up here. You're just gonna lose it. So like how I use Airtable a lot. And Gina, actually you're the one who turned me on to Airtable. So really like Airtable. I use that a lot for kind of strategy planning, content calendar, like that kind of thing, ideas. And then I use like a CRM that has like to do reminders. So I think something like that where you can set those reminders would be a really good idea. And like I said mentioned earlier, I have whiteboards. I love whiteboards. Sometimes it's just about like keeping something right in front of your face because if you put it on like a Google Doc and then you never look at it again, that's not going to help you very much. So
Thank you so, so much. So if any of these tools, sound like a fit for you ladies, please feel free to try them out. If you already have a tool that you like, that's fantastic too. Our winner is Stephanie. Thank you so much, everyone who shared their biggest takeaway. I did a random number generator on Google, and the winner was number 3. So that was Stephanie. So yeah, let me know when you get a chance where you'd like your gift card to be from, and I will get that emailed over to you this afternoon. So that being said, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing in the chat and being here today. Thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing some of your stories and experiences and for choosing this topic. I think that this is something we could all use a little more support on. So I would love to open things up for conversation and questions. So if anyone has a question, something they've been noodling on throughout the talk, please feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute your microphone and ask away, and we'll just go from there. Um, Brittany.
hi.
Hi.
I know you.
Um, so I know you and I have talked one-on-one a little bit about your business coach and how that's been sort of like a fundamental like part of your kind of just like approach to lifing for several years now. But a question that I have is because I've always been interested in the idea of a coach, but also like specifically now a business coach. Um, One of my sort of like toxic traits is like I don't always trust myself to make my own decisions. And this whole like a coach, it's like, oh, what do I do? So like how do you navigate, basically partnering with somebody to coach you without really kind of losing sight of making your own decisions and not feeling like I guess pressured, I don't know, to maybe live up to like somebody else's
Yeah.
expectations or something.
Yeah. I mean, off the bat, I would say a good coach is never, they're not giving you the answers. They're
Hmm.
pulling the answers out of you. So a good coach is going to ask you the right questions that you can learn like from yourself, like, okay, what way do I need to go? Now, of course, they can always offer ideas and help with strategy and stuff, but like ultimately it's really up to you. And I mean, that's where it's like, yeah, you have to spend that time with yourself to figure those things out. And I think the trust factor is a big thing. I think a way that I've learned to trust myself more is when like thinking about what your wins are. And I definitely do that from like an annual basis. So like if end of the year is always like a really good time to reflect. I think it's kind of an easy way to do that. It's like when you get to the end of the year, thinking back of that year of like what are some ways that I like grew as a person? How did I grow in all these different areas? So I think when you spend some time thinking about all those different things that you accomplished and the ways that you grew, it just builds that confidence. And you're just proving back to yourself of like, oh yeah, I set out to do this and I actually did it. It just validates that stuff. I think we need that validation, whether it comes from ourselves, or sometimes coming from other people. I think that just helps tremendously build that confidence. And it's just something that snowballs. Once you start to like build that confidence, it just, every little thing, it's like another notch on your belt. And eventually get to that point where you're owning it, you're owning that identity. It
Hmm.
definitely doesn't happen overnight. Wish it did.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I love that it really starts with choosing the right coach for you. So I
Yeah.
love that. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say like, don't get hung up on having a coach, like as far as like I'm paying for a coach.